For centuries, humanity has looked up at the moon as a silent companion, unchanging, distant, and comforting in its stillness. But what if that silence was never real? What if the moon has been listening all along, waiting for a signal? In early 2025, astronomers monitoring the mysterious interstellar object, known as 3I Atlas, recorded something that shattered decades of cosmic certainty. The object, glowing with an unnatural green hue and displaying erratic shifts in trajectory, emitted a focused energy pulse, one that appeared to be directed not toward Earth but toward the moon. Within seconds, instruments around the world captured something that should have been impossible. The moon replied. Deep space antennas in Spain and Australia detected a returning signal from lunar coordinates that had been radio dead for decades. The transmission wasn't noise. It carried patterns repeating primes, golden ratios, spirals, mathematical signatures often used in theoretical models of communication. NASA's analysts described it as too organized to be natural. For the first time in human history, it seemed as if our oldest satellite wasn't just reflecting light, it was speaking back. The discovery sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. Was this a coincidence, an electromagnetic echo, or the first sign that something beneath the moon's surface had been awakened? Decades of Apollo-era seismic data hinted that the moon vibrated strangely when struck, ringing like a bell for hours. At the time, it was dismissed as a quirk of lunar geology. Now, those forgotten reports were being re-examined. When 3I Atlas's pulse reached the moon, dormant sensors aboard old orbiters began transmitting on their own, picking up faint tremors that matched the rhythm of the incoming energy. To some, it felt like a cosmic knock, a question and an answer that came from deep below. The shock wasn't that an object had interacted with the moon, but that the moon appeared to have responded with purpose. As more data arrived, the event no longer looked like random physics. The pulses followed a structured sequence not just between 3I's Atlas and the moon, but extending across frequencies that touched the Earth's magnetic field. Green auroras began appearing at latitudes where they were never seen before, synchronized with the luminous pulses from 3I Atlas. Compasses shifted unpredictably. Seismic detectors caught rhythmic micro-vibrations echoing through the crust of our planet. It wasn't chaos, it was coherence. Scientists described it as a three-body resonance, as if Earth, Moon, and Atlas were suddenly part of the same hidden network. Yet the greatest mystery remained unanswered. Why now? What triggered the first signal? Was it simply a result of cosmic chance? Or was the moon waiting for a message that finally arrived? The more astronomers analyzed the sequence, the more it looked like an intentional pattern, a mathematical call and response. Some researchers at the European Space Agency quietly admitted that the returning lunar signal contained modulations far too complex to be natural echoes. And when these waveforms were plotted visually, they resembled constellations, lines, and points, connecting into patterns eerily similar to Orion and the Pleiades. A chilling thought began to spread through the halls of observatories worldwide. Maybe 3I Atlas didn't discover the moon. Maybe it remembered it. Because if this was a message, it didn't start in 2025, it had been waiting for millennia to resume. Something ancient had stirred on the moon, and the first words of that cosmic conversation had just been spoken. As scientists scrambled to decode the lunar signal, laboratories from Pasadena to Tokyo worked around the clock, feeding terabytes of raw data into AI models built to detect non-random structures in deep space frequencies. The results defied every statistical baseline. The energy burst from 3I Atlas was narrow-band, so concentrated it mimicked the behavior of a directed laser rather than a natural cosmic emission. When it reached the moon, its amplitude decayed and re-emerged with deliberate variation, as if modulated by something internal. NASA's Deep Space Network recorded a precise rhythm that repeated every 16.79 hours, the same rotational period earlier measured for Atlas itself. That synchronicity couldn't be coincidence. Instruments aboard aging lunar satellites, some inactive for years, unexpectedly powered up and began transmitting binary sequences encoded with prime number intervals. Engineers thought it was interference until older Soviet-era archives from 1971 revealed an almost identical anomaly, radio spikes from the moon, once dismissed as Cold War signal noise. Now those forgotten spikes matched the Atlas pattern perfectly. The connection between an interstellar object and our own satellite was no longer speculative, it was measurable. Across international agencies, debates ignited. Some astrophysicists insisted it was a resonance effect, Atlas's electromagnetic burst stimulating trapped solar particles beneath the lunar crust. Others, particularly within independent observatories, argued it was a communication loop, a ping test, across astronomical scales. The moon, they claimed, wasn't responding chemically or thermally, but intelligently. Theories grew bolder by the hour. The hollow moon hypothesis, long derided as pseudo-archaeology, was suddenly back on conference tables. Apollo seismographs had recorded reverberations lasting nearly an hour when lunar modules crashed into the surface, unlike any other celestial body tested. If cavities existed beneath the surface, they could theoretically resonate like enormous amplifiers, shaping incoming frequencies into coherent responses. But that didn't explain the geometric data embedded in the returning waveforms. Patterns resembling Fibonacci sequences and symmetrical fractals persisted across multiple recordings. These weren't random distortions, they were signatures, mathematical fingerprints. Even more unsettling was their alignment. Every pulse seemed to orient toward Earth's coordinates, triangulated as if the moon were redirecting Atlas's message to us. In other words, humanity had become the third participant in a cosmic relay. While media outlets sensationalized the moon, speaking within research circles, fear mixed with fascination. If 3I Atlas was an artificial object, it could mean the moon was never a passive stone in orbit. It might have been part of an ancient communication infrastructure, reactivated by contact. Meanwhile, magnetometers across the poles began detecting disturbances synchronized with the lunar pulses. And then for 6 hours, everything stopped. Silence, absolute and global. Instruments that had been overflowing with signals suddenly went flat. To casual observers, the event seemed over. But in the subsonic range below human hearing, a faint hum persisted, steady and synchronized, among Atlas, the moon, and Earth. The hum wasn't random. It oscillated across all three bodies, as if maintaining a private channel we couldn't fully intercept. Whatever had begun wasn't ending, it was changing phase, shifting to a mode beyond the limits of our detection. Scientists faced a choice: dismiss it as natural coincidence, or accept the unthinkable that Earth was now inside an active intelligent system older than civilization itself. Governments tried to contain the panic, but the evidence became impossible to suppress. Amateur astronomers from Chile, Norway, and South Africa began reporting an eerie green luminescence spreading across the lunar surface, too uniform, too rhythmic to be reflection. High-resolution cameras captured faint pulses in synchronization with the same frequency Atlas had emitted days earlier. The moon wasn't glowing, it was transmitting. Optical spectrometry confirmed that the wavelength of the glow corresponded precisely with the spectral line of Atlas's light, a unique green emission never before observed in lunar reflection data. For the first time in human history, the moon had become an active light source. The phenomenon spread across the scientific community like wildfire. NASA, ESA, and Roscosmos released carefully worded statements calling the event an atmospheric optical illusion, but leaked internal memos told another story: the signals weren't atmospheric at all. They were directional beams, pointing not randomly into space, but toward the same coordinates that matched Atlas's projected flight path. And when those coordinates were mapped against celestial charts, the vectors traced directly toward the Orion and Pleiades star clusters. That's when an even stranger discovery was made. The mathematical symbols embedded in the returning lunar signal matched carvings found in Sumerian tablets and Mayan calendars, spirals, ratios, and star alignments. Ancient patterns identical to those now seen in modern radio data. It was as if humanity had seen this conversation before, written in stone long before telescopes existed. Could 3I Atlas be part of a recurring celestial cycle, a messenger that awakens the moon every few millennia? The idea that ancient civilizations might have witnessed the same green illumination was no longer dismissed as myth. Legends of the moon, ringing like a drum during eclipses, once folklore began to look disturbingly literal. And if these cycles had happened before, the implications were enormous. Every ancient monument aligned to lunar and stellar positions could have been built not for worship, but for recording messages. Engineers re-examined Apollo's seismic data and discovered an overlooked anomaly, faint rhythmic tremors recurring every 27.3 days, the same as the moon's orbital period. They had been written off as equipment noise, but now reanalyzed in context with Atlas's frequency, they formed a continuous code, an ancient heartbeat, waiting for a pulse to awaken it. The more the data unfolded, the more frightening the hypothesis became. What if the moon wasn't a random cosmic capture, but an engineered structure, an ancient node in a galactic communication grid, dormant until reactivated by a returning signal? Atlas's approach may not have been coincidence. It may have been a key, unlocking an ancient transmitter orbiting our planet. Across the world, power fluctuations intensified. GPS systems desynchronized by milliseconds. Tidal patterns became erratic. Yet, through the chaos, a pattern persisted. The pulses aligned with Earth's rotation and the moon's orbit, creating what some physicists described as planetary synchronization. Earth itself was responding, resonating faintly with Atlas and the moon like an instrument being tuned. And for those who listened carefully, the unspoken question grew heavier. Who was doing the tuning? In the following weeks, the world changed. Cities dimmed their lights to watch the sky, where the moon's surface now glowed with a faint rhythmic pulse, one that synchronized exactly with Atlas's measured rotation, a cosmic metronome beating against the silence of space. What began as a scientific mystery had turned into a global reckoning. Humanity was no longer just observing the universe, it was being observed back. Teams at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory cross-referenced old Apollo telemetry with the new waveforms. Beneath the noise, they uncovered a buried pattern, intervals spaced in golden ratios intertwined with sequences resembling ancient lunar calendars. The structure was too elegant, too deliberate. One analyst whispered the thought that everyone feared, "It's not responding to us. It's continuing a dialogue that started long before we existed." Around the same time, declassified Soviet logs revealed that during the Luna 20 mission in 1972, sensors had picked up low-frequency echoes from deep beneath Mare Tranquillitatis, echoes that repeated every few minutes like a mechanical pulse. Back then, the data was buried under political secrecy. Now re-examined with modern algorithms, those echoes matched Atlas's current modulation perfectly. The conclusion was devastating in its simplicity. Whatever was beneath the lunar surface had not been silent. It had been waiting. When Atlas's signal hit the moon, it might have acted as a trigger, reactivating systems that hadn't functioned for thousands, perhaps millions of years. And when that system woke up, it didn't just speak to Atlas. It reached us. Across the globe, communications infrastructure began experiencing synchronized distortions. Underwater fiber optic cables pulsed with unexplained electromagnetic surges. Radio telescopes picked up ultra-low signals that seemed to move across frequencies as if following Earth's rotation. The hum, the one scientists once dismissed as a geological anomaly, deepened in tone, forming a layered pattern audible only through specialized equipment. Mathematicians described it as recursive, a self-referencing loop that adjusted itself in real time. It was almost as if the signal was learning. Within days, an emergency summit convened at the United Nations. Delegates argued whether Atlas's presence represented a threat or an opportunity. NASA proposed a controlled transmission, an encoded reply aimed at the moon to test for intelligence. But when they transmitted, nothing happened. For nearly 12 hours, silence reigned. Then, as if in direct acknowledgement, the moon's green pulse slowed, shifted, and aligned with the Earth's magnetic field. Magnetometers across the globe spiked simultaneously. The moon, Earth, and Atlas were now resonating at a shared frequency. Humanity had effectively entered a closed loop with two celestial bodies. The implications were incomprehensible. Some physicists speculated that this synchronization might alter gravitational balances. Others feared it was the prelude to something far greater, a system reboot of an ancient network stretching far beyond our solar system. Religious groups called it the awakening of the Watcher. Conspiracy theorists called it Project Echo. Yet for scientists who stared into the data, one truth was unavoidable. This wasn't chaos, it was structure. The green luminescence from the moon began to dim, forming patterns across its craters like circuitry slowly cooling. In its final pulses, telescopes detected faint beams extending toward three star systems, Orion, Cassiopeia, and the Pleiades, the same alignments encoded in ancient carvings from Earth's earliest civilizations. Those constellations weren't just symbolic, they were destinations. As the signals faded, a low subsonic vibration remained weaving through the planet's magnetic field like a whisper in the dark. It was faint, but continuous, almost like a background heartbeat, steady, deliberate, unending. Whatever had begun between Atlas the Moon and Earth wasn't over. It had only gone quiet. The final NASA report used one haunting phrase: "The transmission continues, but not for us." And so, the question remains, did humanity just witness the beginning of communication, or the moment it realized it had never been alone?